Welcome, everyone, to Alaska Quarterly Review's reading series, available on the Alaska Quarterly Review YouTube channel. Please feel free to watch any of our prior programs and to share them. Alaska Quarterly Review is committed to presenting these programs without charge and to showcase vibrant and diverse new and emerging voices and literary conversations with depth, complexity, and humanity. I am Ronald Spatz, Editor-in-Chief of Alaska Quarterly Review. And before we begin, I'd like to make a few important acknowledgements. Alaska Quarterly Review gratefully acknowledges the Anchorage Museum for hosting and providing technical support for this event, and the Center for the Narrative and Lyric Arts, Alaska Quarterly Review's 501c3 umbrella organization, which makes this event possible. I also want to make a land acknowledgement. Alaska Quarterly Review recognizes the indigenous land on which all Alaskans live. Alaska Quarterly Review is located in Anchorage, and Anchorage is Dena'ina homeland. Dena'ina is the language spoken by the traditional, present, and future caretakers of this land, and land acknowledgement opens a space with gratefulness and respect for the contributions, innovations, and contemporary perspective of Indigenous peoples and marks our collective movement toward decolonization and equity. And now today's program featuring poet Julia Danho. Julia Danho is the author of the chapbook 6 Portraits from Shapering Hol Press and the full-length collection Those Who Keep Arriving, winner of the 2018 Gerald Cable Book Award from Silverfish Review Press. In addition to Alaska Quarterly Review, her poems have appeared in journals such as Pleiades, Blackbird, Barrow Street, Southern Poetry Review, and New Ohio Review, and her poems have also been featured multiple times, actually, on Harrison Keilor's The Writer's Almanac, Verse Daily, and on Poetry Daily. Her poem 39th Birthday in Pink Flannel Donut Pajamas was first published in Alaska Quarterly Review. Julie has been the recipient of a fellowship award from the Rhode Island State Council on the Arts, and also from the Rhode Island Foundation's MacColl Johnson Fellowships. Of her poems, Denise Duhamel wrote this of Julia Danho's poetry. The glittering surfaces of her elegant poems are as fascinating as their substance. It is my absolute pleasure to welcome Julia Danho.
Thank you so much, Ron. And thank you for inviting me to be part of this wonderful series, and also for publishing 3 of my poems in Alaska Quarterly Review. It's one of my favorite magazines and such an honor to be in its pages. So I wanted to start out today by reading my 3 Alaska Quarterly Review poems, including the one that Ron mentioned about the Pink Flannel Donut Pajamas. And I think a lot of poets have this experience where you start out writing about one thing and end up writing about something you kind of completely didn't expect. And when I started this poem, it was because my mom had won these pajamas in a raffle, and I couldn't believe how silly I felt and how much I loved wearing these pajamas. And so basically that was kind of what prompted the poem, and it ended up being a poem about my grandmother. And so it might be helpful to know for the poem that Sita is Arabic for grandmother, Dida is Arabic for grandfather, and Hafla is kind of a potluck party. So this is called Lounging on the Couch on My 39th Birthday in Pink Flannel Donut Pajamas. Surely birds would love to peck at the dozens of donuts adorning my arms and legs, the glazed, the jellied, the vanilla frosted, scalloped at the edge, like the worn lace tablecloth in Sita's tenement apartment, where my mother, father, sister, aunts, uncles, cousins would cram in Sundays post-church. And I'd eat the frosting off too, return the bottoms to the box, while Sita frowned and Jida insisted I should disfigure as many donuts as made me happy. After he died, she pulled the walls around her like an Afghan and didn't leave. Sundays, when I delivered the church bulletin to her recliner, she'd clasp my face in both hands, grateful. It's been decades since I sat in a pew, but I brought my mother to the last church hafla where she won these pajamas instead of what she wanted, the platter of walnut baklawa. And maybe I've lived too long to be lounging in pink flannel donut pajamas, but I love how they rub against my leg like a cat's head. Love that someone spent time dreaming up improbable donuts, like this one here, frosted blue-green, then crosshatched with piped white stripes, topped with pink and red sprinkles, a sugared inner tube floating the middle. How can't I be hungry? In the next room, my birthday cake sits on Siddha's old table, mine since the day we emptied her apartment, and I opened dresser drawer after dresser drawer to find hundreds of crocheted dishcloths, stacked as neatly as cash for a ransom. We knew she must have made them in her recliner by the window on those days none of us were there. It's almost noon, and I'm still in pajamas, waiting for my daughter and husband to march into the room and play me the birthday song they wrote, her on toy guitar, him on mandolin. I hear them practicing, and it's so sweet, my teeth ache. Siddha, was it once like this for you? And this next poem is, it's very different from the first one, but these were published as a pair in Alaska Quarterly Review, which I loved because they were just so opposite. So I write a lot about art, and I think this is the only poem in my book about an artwork that I actually saw in Providence, which is, I live just outside of Providence, although in Rhode Island everything is just outside of Providence. So but we have a really wonderful museum called the Rhode Island School of Art and Design Museum. And for a small city like Providence, it's really kind of a great thing to have this really wonderful museum. And I went one time and they had this artwork. And when I first looked at it, it looked like a sculpture on canvas. It was very textured and wiry, and it kind of came out from the frame in the middle. And so the poem is actually kind of designed to look like the artwork. And it's called, the artwork is called Lot 022405 by Donald Moffat. And the poem is called A Long Time Without Touching. The card said oil on linen, but that silver was thick, fibrous, the whole surface like steel wool unwinding, its long wires puckering at the center and lifting off the canvas, thrusting toward me, inches and inches of, let's get sex out of the way, how it strains against itself, held back and held out. But this might be a fist my arms, my eyes are riveted to. It was metal, I was magnetic. He applied the paint with a pastry bag. I had to look it up later to be convinced. How long did I stand there, waiting for something to happen, waiting for someone to notice me waiting? And that pastry, I like to do a lot of research on when I'm writing art poems, because I'm always so fascinated by what went into the artwork, who the artist was, and that was one of the things I learned was like that he did put it on with a pastry bag, which I thought was really fascinating. And so this next poem is a poem I wrote about nuclear war. I had read an article on CNN. It was several years ago, saying that nuclear war could break out at any moment. And I was just on my way to take my daughter to math club. So this is called CNN Says Nuclear War Could Break Out at Any Moment. CNN says nuclear war could break out at any moment, but I'm taking my daughter to math club because she loves playing money bags and Sum Swamp and Smath, which is just Scrabble looted and repackaged for math fans. Bombs are math too, half-lives and chain reactions. Decades ago, my mother was drilled to duck under her desk, protect her face and neck. But do I tell my daughter to take cover or flee for better shelter? A scientist could reduce the decision to equations lovely as calligraphy until the translation. Fallout dose, transit time. Her bomb may be smaller than the one my mother waited for. A mile beyond its blast, she might survive. As she leaves the car, I hand her a backpack filled with stickers and glitter markers. We have it easier than so many. It's raining, and her umbrella springs into a bunny, its ears up, alert. And when Ron and I were talking before the recording started, I was saying that I feel like one of the major themes of my work is anxiety, and I feel like parental anxiety as evidence in that poem and in this one too. A few years ago, we took my daughter to Washington, D.C. She was about 7 or 8, I think. And I had lived in DC years ago when I was in college. I was an intern during the Clinton impeachment trial, although I wasn't an intern at the White House. And so, and things have changed so much security-wise. Back then, you could just walk into museums. There was no security. There was no, I don't think there were very many, if any, bollards. And bollards are they're the big steel poles that they put in front of the building so people can't run their cars into them. And they were her favorite thing in DC. So this is called Ode to the Security Bollards of Constitution Avenue. And it starts with an epigraph from Metro Connection News magazine. Each bollard is a highly engineered piece of steel meant to withstand an 8-ton truck barreling at it at 50 miles an hour. My daughter runs up like you are soldiers returning from war, flinging her arms around your poles, swinging down your single file, head thrown back to the sky, inciting others to drop their parents' hands and follow her lead. We drove 400 miles so she could tour the halls of the Capitol, climb the steps of Lincoln's Temple. Yet it's you she loves best. All along the mall, she finds your variations in silver and copper, even preening in green Greek columns with the congressional seal, and never questions why it is you're here. When I lived in this city, I'd visit Rockets and Pollocks without emptying the metal from my pockets, but that was years before she was even an idea, before they planted you in neat rows around everything worth ruining. Now my child treats you like her playground, and I keep quiet about what you're waiting for, how deep you're driven into the ground. I spend a lot of time writing in coffee shops. I love writing by myself in public. And so this was a poem that I had written one of those days, and I was behind a couple that was having some decent PDA in front of me. And so it was making me think about, and it was making me really uncomfortable. And then later I was thinking about, like, you know, why does seeing people be so affectionate in public make me, and I know others, uncomfortable? Like, what is it about that? And shouldn't that be something that maybe is, you know, maybe is celebrated? And so anyway, this is the poem that was wrestling with my PDA feelings. So this is called The Couple in Front of Me at the Coffee Shop. It feels deep in the marrow, cellular, the way I tense at how she leans back against his chest to point out a streusel muffin while his hands are stroking her hair, then tracing the thin straps of her sundress, rubbing her bare shoulders as if she could grant his every wish. As she talks to the cashier, he's whispering in her ear, nervous as a golden retriever that suspects his owner is soon off to work. They're in their late 50s, I'd guess. He's wearing a checkered button-down that looks like the tags were cut off today. Her face floats under glasses, her nose holds up like a huge red barbell. While I order, they nuzzle just inches away, waiting for their coffees, sharing quick pecks as if to release tension before bursting. They beg for backstory, rekindling a camp romance 40 years later, maybe, or reconnecting after a family death brought her back to this town he never left. Something about them seems unearthed. There is such urgent joy in their lust, as if only frequent caressing keeps the other from disappearing. So why this desire to pry them apart? 2 decades on, you and I still hold hands, sneak the occasional public kiss, yet even at our fevered start, never hand fed each other as they do, her fingers slowly brushing the sugar from his lips. Do you remember that piece we heard on the radio, 3 minutes at the end of a Valentine's broadcast about a couple always making out at their kids' Little League games, and how, at first, everyone gossiped, doing their best not to look? Back then, I dismissed the feel-good twist. By mid-season, all the parents, as if given permission, were openly kissing, just like these two now, lingering by the door, pressed together tight as those neurons, poised to tell a body the moment it's been touched. And I wanted to end with another dessert poem. I have to say that dessert is one of my absolute favorite things, and so it makes its way into a lot of my poems. And when I travel, especially, I'm always concerned with like finding the best dessert possible wherever I go, which kind of drives the people I'm with a little bit crazy sometimes. But my sister had told me one time when I was in New York about, she had never been there, but she said that she had read that, you know, this particular place was the best place to get chocolate chip cookies in the city. So this is another poem where it started out just being about my hunt for chocolate chip cookies and ended up being a poem about something completely different in the end. So this is called The Best Chocolate Chip Cookie in New York City. In case there's a line, I show up at 7, but the man at the counter says the cookies won't be ready until 11. And by then I'll be on the train, nearly halfway back to Providence. He and the dozen people behind me are waiting, so I quickly choose a ham croissant and a blueberry muffin, glittering like a hotel lobby chandelier. The shop's a dab of yellow on the block. Its only seats along the front window, where I sit and look at bleary people stopped at the bodega across the street, touching apples and mangoes until they find the ones most untouched. With my first bite, the croissant comes undone, its shawl falling to the floor. I break off the peak of the muffin and hear the sugar overfill the valleys of my back teeth. I'm trying not to think about how it must taste, the best chocolate chip cookie in New York City. How big, how warm, how it would have collapsed in my mouth, traveled my blood, made wild pinwheels of my cells. How much time have I lost hunting perfection? Once, before cell phones, before the days when cars couldn't linger outside the airport doors, my plane was delayed on the runway for 4 hours, and my husband, before he was my husband, waited for me in his cramped Plymouth, battered from years of lake effect snow. He just waited, reading a book, turning on the car every so often to listen to the radio. When I finally arrived, he was surprised that I thought he'd be gone. He said no one asked why he was there so long or what it was he was waiting for. Thank you so much to Ron and Alaska Quarterly Review for inviting me to be here to do this reading. It's been really fun.